Welcome, friends,
Got
to
it.
the late Wake Up and Think Clearly, or round two, where we're talking about the selfish gene and how unselfish can you get with a selfish gene? Can we become altruistic in our selfishness? Or is it something artificial? I wish to become unselfish. Through meditation, may I become unselfish.
So
even though my selfish gene makes me selfish.
we were discussing
What were we discussing?
where do we stop being the environment? Where's the distinction between I and the environment, the reality? What is the cutting point between me and the whole of reality? Where is that barrier? Where do you cut? Where do you say reality ceases to be reality to become Lewis?
By being a cell. A cell contains the genes, and the cell has a wall, and the cell wall is the border that separates the selfish genes from other selfish genes.
My cell, every one of my cells contains my DNA, my selfish gene. Am I selfish at the cellular level? At one cell is selfish?
So the selfish gene inside each cell is being selfish, but in order for them to survive, they decide to work together and with teamwork, and they form an organism, a body, and then they put a brain on it for even better processing. So why do they do that?
If
and
I
then
have
they have reproduction, sexual reproduction.
If I have a selfish gene, I must have a non-selfish gene also.
Could there be a non-selfish gene inside the selfish chromosome?
Or in order to be unselfish, I need to look outside myself, outside of reality.
So two things regarding this, looking out. So the selfish gene, again, it's just a way of describing our own nature. I don't think it's like a fact. It's more just a hypothesis, not even a theory, really.
Right.
But it was written, it's attributed to Richard Dawkins. But I also wanted to address, I think you presented a false premise, though. You said, when does reality stop being reality and start being Lewis? And I think that it's a false premise. First of all, I don't know that reality is even the best term to use to describe what we're talking about. I mean, reality, base word, the fundamental word real is really just to distinguish what's real and what's not. It's not talking about oneness. And I think that's, with Lewis, I find it, and maybe we could talk about how if we can come to some kind of consensus on if there's a unified field theory, for instance, if everything can be described as one thing. There is no, as far as I know, there is no scientific consensus on that as of yet. So I don't know that reality versus Lewis is really the best way to describe what we're talking about. I mean, reality is a collection of things, and all those things where they cease to be themselves is at the bridge of their nose, at the edge of their atoms, the collection of atoms that identify their border. That's where things would stop being themselves.
Well, I understand your reasoning perfectly. I think we're getting somewhere there. So the whole of reality, if we can talk about that, can we talk about the whole of reality?
Maybe, but we don't even know what if we accept the premise that there is, at some vast eagle-eye point of view, there is a whole, but we don't even know where that ends. Is it a multiverse? Is it a single universe?
Right. Very good. Very good. So that if we talk about the whole, do we not need to imply that it is eternal and infinite? If not, it's never the whole. It's only a part of another part of another part of another part. So if we talk about a whole, the whole of reality, can we agree that it would be everything, anything, I mean, to infinity, without any end? It would be just like, because if not, you cannot talk about the whole. If, for example, if we call reality God, or if we talk about God, I have to immediately imply or infer that God is infinite and eternal, or otherwise it's not the whole, it's not complete. It's something else that is missing there outside of God. And I think exactly the same about reality. Because if reality is real, it must include everything.
But does that whole reality include multiple universes, multiverses?
Absolutely, absolutely. You can say, for example, that Jairo is a tiny universe within another universe, which is his room, or that there's a parallel universe to Jairo, which is Lewis. But you know, if we talk about the whole,
Infinite number of Hyros.
well,
Yeah, I think we're in agreement on all of those points.
yeah. So if we agree that there is a whole, which I call reality, I call it reality to make it, you know, because we know what is real and what is not, or we think we know what is real and what is not. So if there is a reality with a capital R, it includes everything and anything to infinity in space-time. Let's put it that way.
And I agree with the terminology includes. I think that's the most appropriate word. Includes.
Okay. And that means that inside of the whole, there is an infinity of parts. And at no point within reality can we say that something is real or not real, because it is all in reality, so it's real. It is there. Whether it is tangible or intangible, i.e., that within reality, it can be poked, measured, thought of, or anything. So when I say tangible, I'm using also the word phenomenal. And for intangible, I use the word non-phenomenal. Can't see it, you can't measure it, you can't do anything with it. You cannot even think about it. Because if you think about it, it's a thought, and a thought is tangible. So although it is not material, it is tangible in the sense that a thought can see itself, at least in the human mind. We know our thoughts, we see our thoughts, we qualify them, we represent them, we describe them. I'm thinking like this, I'm feeling like that, whatever. Can't touch it, but you can feel it. So that's phenomenal to me. So I describe the whole of reality as a whole that is infinite and eternal. It was always there, will always be there, and it has no boundaries outside or inside, because it's the whole. And no matter how many things we see inside, we're still looking at the whole. The other day I was talking to a gentleman that I discussed these matters with, and I surprised myself saying, you can talk about God and you can talk about a car, as long as you do not think that they're two different things. When you look at a car, you're looking at God. I mean,
so it depends on your. See, that's where you start to.
Right. So that's why I don't use the word God, because it's very, very controversial. But if I say, if you look at a car,
well, even without that, what I was going to say is, the car is not all of reality. All of reality encompasses the car, but from the car's vantage point, it is not all of reality.
Right. Let me fine tune this semantically with words. When you look at a car, aspectually, you're looking at a part of reality, but essentially, you are looking at the whole of reality. That's why there's a guy that said you are, because it's the whole. It's the whole. You only see the part, but you're looking, essentially, you're looking at the whole, because you cannot separate the aspect from the whole. It's part of it. So it is important to be able to see things with a stereoscopic view. One eye, one view, senses the part, but the other perspective is understanding or feeling, apprehending the whole that the part is an aspect of. When you do that, you start looking at reality from a different perspective, a holistic, integral perspective, where you look at a thing, but you see the whole.
I
You
think
see its
I,
essence.
I definitely agreed with that last. I think that was really well stated, that last piece. You know, to comprehend, because it's, yeah, for sure, when you look at a car, to acknowledge that it's a piece of the whole, and that it's all, you know, in the grandest sense, it's all a part of the same thing. And to
And not only
comprehend that
that,
in an intellectual and spiritual level. However, while you're
let
sitting in the
me.
middle of a road contemplating that, you're still going to get run over by the car.
That's a given. So I
That's
wanted
a
to add to that. I
segue.
wanted to add to that a third fundamental part of that kind of weird way of looking at things, because you, let's say, you are looking at the car, and you are seeing the part. You are comprehending the whole. And then in doing so, you realize that this looking and comprehending and seeing is the whole looking at itself. Because you're not other than the whole.
Right. I mean, I would agree with that in a grand philosophical, intellectual way, but I would still
Yes,
say that one has to take care of themselves regardless. One has to
absolutely.
step aside to not get run over.
That's
All
why
right,
you
I'm gonna
have
be a
to
bit-
have those two perspectives, because if
I'm-
not, you
I'm-
don't understand completely.
I'm gonna bring up a contentious point or three. I'm gonna say wrong. I'm gonna say that your reality. I mean, last week we made some progress, Louis. We were able to determine that you are but small g God in your reality. And of course, there is no reality in your worldview because you can't stand competition. Also, you are not finite. You are not infinite. You are finite. And after you're dead, people are still going to have to be carrying on. And I think that Joel joined us for a while and then he left. And I got to wonder if it wasn't just out of sheer boredom, because you keep repeating your mantra, which is self-supportive for your own delusion, but I don't think it's useful for anyone else.
Well, I'm very sorry that I'm pushing people away, Rami.
Well,
And
that was an
and I
assumption on
if
my
I
part. I
if
don't
it's
know
a,
that
if
that
it's
isn't necessarily the case.
I understand that could be the case.
No.
in-
Joel went to get some coffee.
Well,
By the way, Jairo, you've got to
hold on. I
make sure
was
that you can
sweating
admit,
already.
because I had to admit Joel and then myself on this other station, but my son is actually on the recording station right now, and it causes him trouble for me to disturb him. So if you can keep an eye out for those who are trying to join the room that are in the waiting room, because you currently have.
I made you a host, and
I understand, but I'm not on the host station. My son is. If I try to take over the mouse, he starts SIBing.
Can you make me a? Oh no, you can't make me a host. Well, I made Central Florida a host, so I can't let anybody
Okay.
in. Looks like.
From Central Florida, I should. Well, no, actually, from Rob. If you could, well, geez, only one person can be that now. Huh. Interesting.
So, Rami, let me ask you this question: if I am finite,
Well, of course you are.
if I am finite, I am not reality, because reality is infinite.
Well, it's kind
I-
of like you're your own priest at Plato's cave, inside of Plato's cave, or at least there's a portion of you acting as the priest, casting the shadows. And you're going, this is reality, and that thing inside you that's casting the shadows keeps generating the shadows.
If I am finite, the whole of Louis is going to disappear, right?
Well, eventually. after your death, there'll be photos, maybe some writings, a name
Oh.
on a census record, set of
Yo,
census
So,
records.
so
Yo,
what you,
listen
you are
to
agreeing with me that I don't have
YouTube
an
channel.
eternal soul or eternal spirit, some
Well,
kind of a little
okay, so
Lewis
you are
that's gonna
1,
go somewhere
2,
forever?
3, or perhaps 4 different components that make up Lewis. Let's say that you're at this time. Let's say that you're at least 2. There is your body, and then there is your soul. And at least within the Judeo-Christian, within I can't speak for the Jewish context because I've never
No,
been a
you
Jew.
must speak for yourself. I'm interested
but,
in what
but
you
within
think.
within the context of at least Christianity, I would say that there are scriptures that state that the beginning, and I think this actually comes from the Jewish scriptures, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. And what does that mean? We have to ask, what is meant by that? Well, later on, there's another scripture that states, fear not man who can destroy your body, but fear God who can destroy both your body and your soul. So you may persist as a soul, someone who is born, who inherited the soul that all mankind has had since the start of mankind. But is it possible for your soul to be annihilated? I can't answer that, nor do I have the power to do that. Man can kill man, and I'm not advocating any man to kill any other man, or woman, or child, or you can take that as far as you want to go. But in terms of your soul, that thing that is you apart from you, and some reductivist materialists would say would reduce soul to mind. Your mind certainly isn't operating, because once your body is dead, under the materialist reductivist model, your mind ceases to be once it no longer has the supporting structure of the physical brain and all the electrochemical activity that's happening, fueled by oxygen and all the various hormones that make it function or enable it to function.
Well, I'm not really my body, but I am really my soul, and my soul may or may not be killed, right? Is that
Well,
is that what you're saying?
If God has the ability to completely annihilate you, then you shall be. And it seems that to be the case, at least from the scriptural references. But it gets into that larger question of what is soul, also what is spirit, also. Pardon me. Who am I and what am I? And where am I going from here? And is there life after death?
Well, since I am everything, since I'm everything in no,
you're not. That's your delusion. It is obviously clear.
Since I am everything and nothing at the same time, which is to say, I am reality or part of reality, but I am also
exactly
the whole of reality. The whole of reality,
but not but only the whole of your reality within your own delusion.
Well, yes, that's my perspective. My perspective is my delusion. But I see myself.
You're not advancing any conversation so long as all you're doing is repeating your own personal mantra.
No, I'm just trying. I'm contrasting. I'm contrasting views. I'm contrasting views with you and with everybody else. I'm just contrasting views. These are interesting things. It's more interesting than talking about soccer or football. I think the very concept of discussing being and non-being is interesting. I mean, if it weren't, we wouldn't be talking here. We would be watching infomercials on TV, maybe. I don't know. Or we would be walking. I don't know. So we would be doing something else.
Do you get and appreciate the criticism, or will you be continuing to bore us with your same repeated delusion mantra?
Well, and maybe you're going to do the same thing Joel did. Eventually, you're not going to come back to this Zoom meeting.
Well, what would be the point except to reinforce your own delusion at that point, or try to make a disciple out of Hiram?
I'm just trying to exchange views here. I'm just trying to see if we can.
Yes, but I think we've got your views. I've heard it repeatedly, week after week after week. I haven't heard much new coming out of you. It seems like a dead empty cul-de-sac of a philosophy, and I just have to lay that out there.
I used to think that I was mortal. But I don't think that anymore. I used to agree with you.
Okay.
but I don't agree with you anymore. And I'm just, I think it's interesting to compare views because I might be wrong or you might be wrong. It doesn't matter much. Reality doesn't care because it's everything and nothing at the same time. But this is colorful,
Well,
if anything.
let me ask you, what if reality has no conscience?
What
In
if it
other words,
doesn't?
there can be multiple consciousnesses within reality, but reality itself is consciencelessness.
That I propose that reality doesn't know it exists if it's not through its parts.
And to a degree, for how long have you been making an idol out of this thing that you call reality?
I don't analyze it because it's me. Unless you're
not?
saying that I analyze myself and I'm full of BS.
Well, you
And I
you
don't analyze
reinforce
either
a
myself or anything.
delusion. You
I'm just
reinforce a delusion. What's the what does that? I guess that enables you to get from week to week. But how long are you going to reinforce the same delusion? And are you going to do that unto death?
until I change my mind.
Okay. Well, then that's, I think, what would be a productive course of discussion. Let's see what it takes for you to change your own mind or to aid you so that you may consider another direction, maybe break out of your own
Yeah.
box.
Do you agree with Caleb that the whole reality is the whole and it is eternal and infinite?
I don't know. I didn't hear enough of Gabe's argument.
Caleb, would you retake that comment that you made, but that we seem to agree upon?
Louise, before you go on with that, please. Whether somebody agrees or disagrees, sharing is sharing. Whether you know this or not, Louise, I'm only going to share this for the sake of sharing, because really, I know my own mantras too, and thank you, Rami, for sharing that. If you share something, the duration might give you a little bit for your own indication of how it values it. Asking a question for somebody else where you already know your own stance is actually being clever. That's nothing to do with being wise. You could be smart. So in this case, please don't drag in other people. If they want to share voluntarily, let them share voluntarily, because I've already got a sense Gabe will intercede and share. You're playing this game, which is fine, Louise. But if you're going to say, listen, Dominic or whoever, I don't like talking about soccer. Yeah, because you don't want to, because you don't know how to monopolize it. Let other people, if you're going to bring up what the concept of reality is, share it, be done with it. Let other people put an input, because if you can learn to hear other people, then you can spend time listening to yourself. Now, if this brings you value and say, okay, guys, this is my version of reality, but then you have to reinforce it by debating other people or reading it, then you're not sure of yourself. I could truly say to a friend, listen, Dominic, I'm sure of what I believe in or what I think. I say, okay, fine. So then you're okay with me bombarding you with all kinds of stuff. Yes, because that will validate whether or not you're sure or not. Now, whether or not, like Rami's saying, delusional, I use the word illusion, it is still a play. We all have our own stories, and our stories aren't just what we do every Saturday. Our stories are what we did before all of this. So in this case, Louise, I know you want to share with other people, but you're not really sharing. Really, you're not. Sharing is an interaction with either people, and you bring up a topic, whether we're talking about thinking, feeling, emotions, compassion, reality. These are just words. I get it. If we were none of us were able to ever learn how to speak and all that, then how would we know what reality is? Would it be based only on our actions? Or even that, I've gone on too long, but I know enough to say enough and I cut my off. Because if not, then you're always like, I got to get back at somebody. I got to prove a point. Let me drag in somebody else that I know that actually agrees with me. I don't know Gabe's story, but he's sharing. Now, whether or not he thinks it's science or whatever, once again, if I'm my story, then why am I dragging in other dogmas? It's my story. And if I didn't know how to speak the language, well, how would I share it? These are just things to think. Even that, I've actually done diarrhea of the mouth right now.
Okay. So I will say what we were discussing for Rami, who missed it. I think there was some kind of a concurrence of thought that there is one whole of reality, and that whole is eternal and infinite, and it includes everything within it, which is aspectual. Everything in reality is an aspect of reality, distinguishable from the whole, which has all the aspects to infinity and eternity. That's the theory.
It sounds like what you're describing is a monistic God.
Monistic.
Yes.
One.
As opposed to like dualistic.
Right. God is God. There's only one.
In a dualistic system, there's God and creation, which in ways I kind of still operate out of, although I can also see the universe and God as necessarily being, at least within the context of, let's say, the story of Genesis, you see leading with God and then coming reality out of thereof.
Yeah, but I see God and reality as concentric. They belong to the same ensemble. You know,
What does that mean?
There's no God here on this side and reality on the other. I see them as one.
Okay, so you said something. You said, I see reality on this side, God on that side, and then
You
you
do.
kind of stated that reality. Okay, well, not necessarily, because I'm still trying to work out the whole differentiation between creator creation and then also the idea of something like Genesis chapter 1 verse 2, which describes God as present on the face of the waters. So I think we could see reality as a reflection of the creator thereof. Does that make sense? But I don't speak from a subjective personal sense. I'm speaking from a universal sense.
So the creation is the representation of the creator?
I think that it is something that comes out of.
Okay, so it's the same thing.
Well, our interface to the divine may be through creation itself. I mean, it is each and every moment. But I would not negate or neglect or try to annihilate out of my own personal existence or understanding the concept of the God from whom all has
Right.
sprung. To say that God is reality is to me a disacknowledgement of God's presence, because if reality is all you got, then you're in a very lonely sort of existence.
Right? So you're saying that, but lonely would be that God is on one side and reality is on the other, and I'm on that side in reality because I'm not God. That's lonely. That's alienation. I am trying. In my view, I am not lonely because I am it. The whole thing is
Your own best friend.
one thing. Yeah, isn't God
Sure.
his best friend?
Well, I cannot say for certain. I know that Hebron, which in Arabic is the city is named Al Khalil, which means the friend, because it was said that Abraham was the friend of God. I don't know if that plays into this at all. I'm saying that perhaps we are all the imaginations, and that what our role here in this plane of existence, or in our various planes of existence, potentially, is to be the friends of God. I'd like to think that would be the setup and the purpose of the goal, but I cannot be so proud as to imagine to necessarily know God's purposes. But if I were a divine entity able to spin off a whole universe, one of the things I think that at least I would do, and I am not God again, I am not, but one of the things I would want to do, and I think this is true because men have tried to do this in their efforts to create artificial intelligences, that I would want to have parts of that reality to be able to speak and interact with. And you saw that was the case between Moses and God, between Adam and God, between Enoch and God, repeatedly, even between Abel and Cain and God. These were all figures within the presence of God in conversation with God. At least so goes the story.
So Abraham wants to talk to God, finds it pleasing. Does God
Well, the
want
key
to
is
talk?
to listen.
Yeah.
The key is to listen.
And God, does he want to talk to Abraham? Is that a two-way street? Abraham was, right. So it goes both ways.
Yes. and that to me is a fully realized existence.
And that's a mutual need.
Well, if we're created in the image of God and we have a implicit need to be social, to meet with others, to interact with the minds and the beings of other beings, then perhaps that is a reflection of part of God's nature.
So does God.
Not to say that God needs anyone or anything. I mean, after all, he's spun off a universe. There's nothing we can do that's going to go, hey, check this out. But you know what? He can look at the things that we do and like a father towards a child, be pleased with how it is that they spend their time.
Well, there you have it.
Can we, creatures of God, sons and daughters of God, form a union? And
Well, it gets dangerous.
And demand that God eliminate evil, or else we won't talk to him anymore.
That's a
Actually,
strike.
there have
That's
been
a-
times, if you read Exodus, God has removed his presence from mankind, sometimes for 40 and 80 years at a time. Sometimes perhaps even for longer, because what the theologians, and this goes back, we touched on this before as well, the theologians had summed up that evil is the flip or the reverse of freedom. So with freedom, you always have the option to disobey. And then when you disobey and separate from the presence of God, one of the side effects appears to be the creation of moral evils. The Nazi state, or the people who made it up, they disobeyed, they disagreed, they tried to make a new world, or make the world new and according to their own philosophies, and 12 or 30 million people, I forget how many in total, died during World War II. But yeah, but God has to do that. He has to grant us the freedom to make the choice. Otherwise, we'd be nothing more than automaton. He made us in such a way so that we could be beings who could depart from him, because no one wants, well, I don't know, maybe some people want others to be around them because they want them to be around them, but not necessarily because they want to be around them. So I mean, I want to be around God and amongst fellow believers in God, and spend as much time as possible in that sort of realm, because I just find it so much healthier and so much more productive to be there versus the alternative.
In the processing of going to heaven, and when we get to the point where, okay, you're admitted, can we do we have the freedom of choice to say, no, I'm not going in there, because, and I'm doing this in protest, I'm not going in there until you release all those who are in hell? And could we all do that as like a protest to God, saying, we're not going in until you release all those that are in hell right now and admit them to heaven, and we're not going into heaven until you do that?
Well, that was sort of the motivation
to do that, and wouldn't that be an immense help for all our dearly beloved who we think went to heaven, but they're actually in hell right now?
Two responses. That was sort of the motivation of Dante in writing his trilogy. The Divine Comedy, where you have hell, purgatory, and heaven. That's an interesting study, and you can search it up on YouTube if you don't want to read the whole work, or a translation of the whole work from the Italian. But the other there's actually two other points. I got to get to the earlier point, and hopefully I'll remember the original second point. But the earlier point, or the 0th point, was that when Jesus started his ministry, he started out on the street corner saying, change your thinking, which is another way of saying repent, turn away from the old way, change your thinking, and before, behold, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And then in another section there, it's written that seek ye first the kingdom of heaven and all of his righteousness, or God's righteousness, or maybe it's the kingdom's, it's collectively righteousness, and then all these things shall be added unto you. In other words, all those things, let's say like material wealth and goods and friendships, relations, all these other sort of aspects that anyone, whether they're a believer in God or not, who may just naturally pursue, Jesus says, don't worry about pursuing what everyone else is pursuing. All that stuff's going to come. What you need to focus on is the kingdom of heaven and its realization. And then in his prayer, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So we're talking about the presencing of heaven amongst the body of believers. That is the core, of course, the core mantra of the Christian.
At the risk of sounding uncouth,
Mm-hmm.
I